You know, just going back to the presentation that you gave this morning, one of the things you made quite clear is your thoughts about what you call the Greater Depression. Could you expand upon that a little bit?
Yeah, the first thing I like to do, of course, is when I use that word depression, is I like to define my terms, because people tend to throw terms around in a nebulous manner. And when that happens, it's proof they don't actually know what they're talking about. So let's define the word depression. I use three broad definitions of the word depression. The first broad general definition is it's a period of time during which most people's standard of living drops significantly. And I believe that we have entered upon something that I call the Greater Depression in about 2008. A proof I would offer for that is this. Very briefly, since we're not really discussing economics here, it's that the way you become wealthy is by producing more than you consume and saving the difference, okay? So the net savings in a society provides the capital to expand, develop technologies, and so forth. The problem that we have today is there is no net savings in the Western world. It's all debt. Trillions and trillions of dollars of debt on most levels. And what that means is that we've been living out of capital accumulated by generations past, and we're living out of projected future income.
The debt servicing obligations that you have would be coming out of future capital accumulation.
Exactly. So as far as I'm concerned, we've gone past the tipping point, and the Greater Depression has started, using that definition as a period of time when most people's standard of living falls significantly. But there are other definitions that I use too, which are helpful. One is a depression is a period of time when the business cycle climaxes. Now, business cycles in the West last typically 4 to 10 years, but we really shouldn't even have business cycles. If we lived in a free market economy, there'd be some reasons for fluctuations, but business cycles are really created by the government's debasement of the currency, which is called inflation. It causes people to do things that they otherwise wouldn't. This is what causes the business cycle. One of the things is, like debt, it makes people tend to think they're richer than they really are. So I'm of the opinion that since the last depression ended in 1946, and that depression lasted from 1929 to 1946. World War II is definitely part of that depression. We've been in a new super cycle. And the last part of it, since about 1980, has been driven just by debt. So that leads me to my third definition of a depression, and it's a period of time when distortions and misallocations of capital are liquidated. And I expect that if you're invested in things that might have looked good over the last 30 years, they're going to look very bad in the future, because I think the world's going to change radically over the next generation.
Mm. And you expect this Greater Depression to last as long as the Great Depression? If that was 17 years, are you looking for 17 years from 2008 going forward?
Yeah, well, it's very tough to predict that, but let me say this. It's that the economic depressions are, by and large, products of political intervention in the economy. And they can last as long as you'd like. The Soviet Union had a depression that lasted from 1917 to past 1990. Chinese had a depression that lasted from 1948 to 1980. It can go on as long as you'd like a depression, too. It'll be over when these governments start to voluntarily or involuntarily free marketize their economies. And, but there are such severe problems. I mean, it's going to take a long time for this thing to wind itself down. But there's some good news, and that is this. It's that there are two things that make things better in the world. One is individuals, as individuals, working for their own interest. And when people think as individuals and for their own future, They want to produce more than they consume in whatever they're doing and save the difference, okay? That builds capital. So I'm counting on the 6 billion people in the world to each build their individual capital by savings, number one. And number two, advances in technology. And I'm sure that that's going to continue as long as there's capital to finance it. So no, the Depression's not going to last forever. And it's a question of whether those two influences in the free market can overcome the dissipation of capital caused by the state.